In 1959, a cabinet maker in Hickory, North Carolina, was handed a job a younger man had already turned down. A rich family wanted a curved stair rail that followed the stairs around a turn, and the only shop in the county that could bend wood like that wanted a fortune in 6 weeks. The old-timer took the job, went out to his scrap pile behind the shop, and came back with an armload of thin offcuts nobody else would have burned. He glued them up over a form he shaped himself, and the rail he made was stronger than a solid one and truer than the machine shops, and it cost him almost nothing but time. That rail is still on those stairs. The way he bent that wood, with nothing but scraps and a form, is number 3 on this list. And the one habit underneath everything he ever built, the plainest thing in the whole trade, is number 1. He was not a rare man. In 1959, there was an old-timer like him in the back of half the shops in America, a man who could look at a pile of scrap and see the tool he needed hiding in it. He did not own the big machines. He could not afford them. And here is the secret he knew that we have forgotten. He did not need them. A $1,000 tool is sold to do one job perfectly. A block of scrap wood, shaped right, does that same job just as perfectly for the price of nothing. We traded that away for a catalog. We were taught that good work requires expensive machines and that an empty wallet cannot do fine work. Both of those things are lies. That knowledge did not die because it stopped working. A shop-made jig is as accurate today as it was in 1959. It died because there is no money in teaching a man to make his own tools. Number 14 holds a board dead flat for a perfect cut, doing the job of a $400 clamping table with a piece of scrap and 2 wedges. Number 8 cuts a joint so precise people swear it came off a machine, using a block of wood a man made in 10 minutes. And number 1 is the plainest thing on this list. It costs nothing. It is the reason every one of these fixes works, and it is the one skill that no machine has ever been able to sell you. These 20 fixes were never about scrap. They were the mark of a man who owned almost nothing and could build anything. Not equipment. Ingenuity. Every fix on this list that Hickory man had in his own 2 hands. If that kind of resourcefulness is worth remembering, subscribe and stay to the end, because the last one is the one that matters most. Let us count down the 20 lost carpentry fixes old-timers did with scrap wood that outperform any $3,000 machine. Number 20, the scrap wood push stick. A man feeding a board across a saw or a jointer with his bare fingers is a man who will lose one, and the store sells a plastic push stick that is too small and slick to trust. You take a piece of scrap, you cut a bird's mouth notch in the end to hook the board, and shape a handle you can grip hard. It pushes the wood through with your hands a foot from the blade, and it grips better than anything molded from plastic. Make it long, longer than feels necessary, so your hands are never near the blade. For the man who wanted to keep all 10 fingers, this scrap did the job of a $50 safety accessory, better and for free. Every old shop had a dozen hanging on nails, made and remade as they wore out. Not a tool you buy, a tool you shape from the offcut. Number 19, the winding sticks. A board looks flat on the bench, but it has a twist in it you cannot see with your eye, and that twist ruins everything you build from it. A $400 machine will flatten it. 2 sticks of scrap find the twist for free. You cut 2 straight, matched strips of scrap. You lay one across each end of the board and sight across the tops. If the sticks are parallel, the board is flat. If one leans, the board is twisted, and the sticks show you exactly how much. Paint one stick dark so it reads sharp against the light. For the man planing a board flat with his own hands, these two scraps told him the truth the machine only assumes. The Hickory man kept a painted pair on a nail for 50 years. A tool cabinet makers have used for 400. Not a machine that flattens, two sticks that see the twist. Number 18, the story stick. A man measuring the same thing over and over with a tape makes a small error every time, and the errors add up until nothing fits. You take a straight stick of scrap. You mark every measurement on it once. The cabinet height, the shelf spacing, the door width, all of it. Then you set the tape aside and transfer every mark. Every piece comes out identical because they all came from one stick, not from numbers read 100 times. Mark it once, carefully, and every part after is perfect. For the man building a wall of cabinets, this scrap did what a laser measure does now, without a battery or the errors. Not a number you remeasure, a stick you mark once. Number 17, the bench hook. A man cross-cutting a small piece with a handsaw holds it with one hand and saws with the other, and it slips, and the cut wanders. A bench hook is a scrap of board with a cleat on each face, and it turns your bench into a clamp. One cleat hooks over the edge of the bench. The other stops the wood. You push the piece against it and saw. It holds the work without a vise and gives you a square edge to guide the saw. For the man with no clamps, this 10-minute scrap fixture did the job of a bench vise for nothing. Every apprentice made one his first week. The Hickory man's cleat was worn to a shine by his own hands. Not a vise you crank, a hook you cut from a scrap. Number 16, the shooting board. The end of a board off the saw is never perfectly square, and a machine to true it costs a fortune. A shooting board makes it dead square with a hand plane and a piece of scrap. You build a scrap platform with a stop and a straight track. You lay the board against the stop and run a plane on its side down the track, shaving the end square. The plane rides the track, so the cut is square whether your hand is or not. Keep the iron sharp. This is a shaving cut, not a hogging one. For the man fitting a tight joint, this scrap jig did the work of a precision trimmer and left a glass smooth end. Not a machine that squares the end, a board that guides the plane.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us who still believe a man should be able to fix his own home. It's the forgotten handyman secrets, the old-fashioned repair tricks our grandfathers used to fix anything around the house and keep it running for life. But these skills are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. Don't pay a repairman ever again. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait right here.
Number 15, the doweling jig. Two boards joined edge to edge with dowels need holes that line up exactly, and a metal doweling jig costs real money and still drifts. You bore a few holes dead straight through a thick block of scrap. Now that block is your jig. You clamp it over the mark and run the bit through the scrap hole, and it holds the drill perfectly square and in the right spot every time. Bore the block's holes carefully once, and it guides 10,000 after. For the man building a tabletop, this block aligned every dowel better than the store-bought jig. Not a jig you buy, a block you bore once. Stop the count for a moment and look at what these fixes really are. Every single one of them replaces a machine, and the machine is where the money is. Walk into any woodworking store today, and the whole floor is built to sell you a solution you could have made from your own scrap bin. A $400 clamping table, a $300 doweling jig, a $1,000 planer. The tools are real, and the good ones are worth owning. But here is what the catalog will never tell you. Almost everyone started life as a shop-made jig, a thing some old-timer figured out with a scrap of wood. A company simply put it in a steel housing and added a price. The jig came first. The machine is the jig, sold back to you. There is no money in a scrap of pine, and a great deal of money in the machine that does the same thing. So we were taught to want the machine and forget the scrap. The old-timer was not poor because he used scrap. He was free because he did not need the machine at all. Number 14. The wedged clamping cauls. A wide panel glued up will cup and buckle unless it is held dead flat while it dries, and a clamping table for that runs into the hundreds. You cut 2 stout scraps for each spot, one under the panel and one over it. You drive a thin scrap wedge between the caul and a stop to force it tight and flat. The wedge does the pressing, and a nickel of scrap holds a panel flatter than a fancy table. Round the cauls faces a hair, so they press the middle first. For the man gluing up a tabletop, this scrap gave him dead-flat panels every time, and the Hickory man never owned a clamping table in his life. Not a table you buy, cauls and wedges you cut. Number 13, the kerfing for a curve. A board will not bend around a tight curve, and the machine that bends wood costs thousands and takes up a room. You cut a series of closely spaced saw kerfs partway through the back of the board. Now it bends around the curve, the kerfs closing up as it goes. A straight board made curved with nothing but your saw. Space the kerfs even and stop them all at the same depth, or the curve will be lumpy. For the man wrapping a curved cabinet front, this did what a steam box and bending form do with cuts he made in 10 minutes. Not a machine that bends wood, cuts that let it bend itself. Number 12, the scratch stock. A man wants a decorative bead or a groove along an edge, and the tool for it, a router and its bits, costs hundreds. A scratch stock is a broken piece of old saw blade, filed to the shape you want, held in a scrap wood handle. You file the profile into the steel and clamp it in the scrap. You drag it along the edge, and it scrapes the exact molding you filed, as many times as you like. File the shape you want, and you own a router bit that cost you nothing. For the man restoring old trim no store carried, this scrap and steel tool matched a 100-year-old profile perfectly. Not a router you buy. A profile you file into scrap. Number 11, the bow saw from scrap. A man needs to cut a tight curve, and the bandsaw that does it costs $1,000 and weighs 300 pounds. A bow saw is 2 scrap wood arms, a stretcher, a bit of cord, and a thin blade, and it cuts curves a bandsaw cannot reach. You build the wooden frame from scrap and string it with a twisted cord that tensions the blade. It turns on a dime through the tightest curve. The frame you make in an afternoon does what a heavy machine does, and it fits in a drawer. For the man cutting cabriolet legs, this scrap frame went places no machine could follow. Not a bandsaw you buy, a frame you build and string. Here is the part of his story we have skipped. The Hickory man did not start out able to see a tool hiding in a scrap pile. He came up in the Depression, and that is not a figure of speech. That is where he learned everything he knew. He was 12 in 1934, apprenticed to an old German cabinet maker because his family could not feed him. The shop had almost no money and almost no machines. One day the boy complained that they did not have the right tool, that a real shop would have bought it. The old German did not scold him. He walked to the scrap barrel, pulled out a block of maple, and in 15 minutes made the exact tool they needed. He did the job with it, then handed the block to the boy without a word. Then he said the only thing about the trade that ever really stuck. A rich man buys the tool, a craftsman makes it. The boy spent the next 50 years proving it, in a shop that never did have the big machines, turning out work that beat the shops that did. And that lesson, the plainest thing in the whole trade, is number 1. Number 10. The panel raising with a hand plane. A raised panel for a cabinet door, that bevel around the edge, is what a $200 router bit and a heavy router do now. An old-timer did it with a plane and a scrap fence. You clamp a straight scrap to the panel as a fence, set your plane at an angle, and plane the bevel down to a line. The fence keeps every side even. 4 sides, 1 plane, no screaming router, and no dust cloud. Score the cross-grain sides first, so the plane doesn't tear them out. For the man building a set of doors, this method matched what the machine does and left a cleaner surface, not a router that raises the panel, a plane and a scrap fence. Number 9. The straight edge from 3 boards. A man needs a dead straight edge to work from, and a machinist's straight edge in wood costs a fortune. You can make one true from 3 scrap boards and nothing else. You plane 3 board edges straight, then test them against each other in pairs. Any hump on one shows against another. You plane it off, rotating through all 3 until they match. 3 edges that all match each other can only be truly straight. It is the one shape they can share. For the man with no reference tool at all, 3 scraps made a straight edge as true as any bought one. This is how the first straight edges in history were made, before there was anything to copy. Not a straight edge you buy, 3 boards that true each other. Number 8. The shop-made marking gauge and knife line. A joint that fits like it came off a machine starts with a line finer than any pencil, and the secret is not a machine at all. You make a marking gauge from a scrap block and a stem with a sharp steel point and scribe your lines instead of drawing them. The knife line severs the wood fibers, so the saw and chisel drop into a groove and stop exactly on the line. Cut to the waist side of the scribed line, always, and the joint closes with no gap. For the man cutting dovetails by hand, this scrap gauge and a knife made joints so tight people swore they were machined. The precision was never in a machine, it was in the line. Not a tool that measures, a line you cut instead of draw. Number 7. The wooden hand screw clamp. Good clamps cost real money, and a man never has enough of them. The old wooden hand screw, 2 scrap wood jaws and 2 threaded rods, clamps at any angle and grips things a metal clamp slides right off of. You buy the 2 screws cheap and make the jaws from scrap. The wooden jaws will not mar the work, and plane to any shape a job needs. Angle the jaws by turning the screws differently, and it grips a taper as well as a square. For the man short of clamps, a Saturday of scrap work gave him a dozen. Not a clamp you buy by the case, a clamp you build from scrap. Number 6. The tri-square check and the scrap winding. A square that is not truly square ruins every joint, and you cannot tell by looking, and a precision machinist's square costs plenty. You check any square against a scrap board. You scribe a line along the square's edge across a true planed board, then flip the square over and scribe again from the same spot. If the two lines match, the square is true. If they splay apart, it is off by half the gap. Any straight scrap edge will test your most important tool. For the man who trusted his square with every cut, this 5-minute test caught the error before it cost him a project. Not a square you trust blind. A square a scrap proves. Number 5. The sanding block and the scrap profile. Sandpaper wrapped around your fingers rounds over every edge you meant to keep crisp, and a set of profiled sanding tools costs a surprising amount. You wrap the paper around a scrap block for a flat surface and for a molding around a scrap shaped to the reverse of the profile. The block keeps the surface flat and the edges sharp. The shaped scrap sands a curve without destroying it. For the man finishing a piece of trim, a few shaped scraps did what an expensive contour sanding set does. Not a tool you buy to sand a shape, a scrap you shape to fit it. Number 4, the wooden mallet and the drawboard peg. A joint held by a metal clamp overnight, or by expensive glue and a clamping system, was held by the old-timer with a wooden peg and no clamp at all. You make a mallet from a scrap block for driving chisels and pegs from scrap for drawing joints tight. You bore the peg holes slightly offset, so when you drive the scrap peg through, it pulls the joint closed and holds it forever. No clamp and no weighting. The offset does the clamping, and the peg does the holding for the life of the piece. Offset the hole only a little, or the peg will snap going in. For the man with a timber frame or a heavy door, scrap pegs held joints that outlasted the clamps that would have cost a fortune. Not a clamp you rent by the hour, a peg that clamps forever. Number 3. The bent lamination over a scrap form. This is the fix from the top of our story. The curved rail that beat the machine shop. A solid piece of wood bent to a curve wants to spring back and eventually cracks, and steam bending needs equipment most men never had. You resaw a board into thin strips, or use scraps you already have. You spread glue between them and clamp them over a curved form you shaped from scrap. When the glue dries, the stack holds the curve forever, stronger than a solid piece could ever be, because the grain runs the whole length of the curve. Shape the form once, carefully, and it makes matching curves all day. For the man building a curved rail, this pile of scrap over a scrap form beat a shop full of bending equipment. Not a machine that bends the wood. Thin scraps glued to a curve. Number 2, the shop-made cutting gauge and the fitted joint. The thing that made an old-timer's work look machine-made was never a machine, it was the fittee, and the fit came from tools he made to be more precise than his hands alone. A cutting gauge, a marking gauge with a small knife instead of a pin made from a scrap block, scored a line so clean and so exactly placed that the joint could not help but fit. He would make a gauge for a job, set it once, and every cut on every piece landed in the same place, to within a hair. The tool he made was more accurate than the most careful pencil mark and cost him a scrap and an hour. A machine repeats a cut, a well-made gauge repeats a line, and the line is where the fit is born. For the man whose joinery people mistook for factory work, the secret was always a shop-made gauge, not a machine that makes it fit. A gauge you make to place the line. Number 1, seeing the tool inside the scrap. And it is the thing this whole list has been circling since the first minute. Before the jig and the gauge and the form, before any single fix on this list, the Hickory man did one plain thing that no machine has ever done and no store has ever sold. He looked at a problem, and then he looked at his scrap pile, and he saw the tool that solved it hiding in the wood, and he made it. That is the entire trade. Every fix on this list is just that one habit made specific. A man refusing to believe that the solution had to be bought. He did not learn it in a school. He learned it at 12 in a depression shop with no money and no machines from an old German who pulled a block of maple out of a barrel and said, "A rich man buys the tool, a craftsman makes it." Here is the part worth sitting with, and it is the best news on this whole list. This is the one thing on here that costs absolutely nothing, and it is the one thing they can never sell you, because the moment you have it, you stop being a customer. The scrap is already behind your shop, or free at any job site, or in the dumpster behind the lumberyard. The forms and the jigs and the gauges are an afternoon of your time. And the ability to look at a pile of nothing and see the tool inside it is not a talent you are born with. It is a habit you build, one jig at a time. The machines are real, and the good ones are worth owning, and no one is telling you to be poor. But you were sold a lie that says you cannot do fine work without them, and every fix on this list is proof that the lie is a lie. Not the most expensive thing on this list, the plainest, and the only one that makes you free instead of a customer. None of it needed a machine. That was the point, and it is the thing the catalog can never admit. A man who could see the tool inside a scrap owed nothing to anyone. He made the jig instead of buying the table. He bent the wood over a form he shaped himself. He cut a joint with a gauge that cost him nothing and beat the shop that had everything. The machines are real and some are worth owning, but the craft was never in the machine. The craft was in the man who did not need it. That was not taken from us because it stopped working. A shop-made jig is as true today as it was in 1934. It was quietly buried because a man who makes his own tools is a man who has stopped buying them. We did not lose the machines. They fill the stores, more of them and more expensive every year. What we lost was smaller than any of them and worth more than the whole catalog, and an old German said it to a hungry boy over a scrap barrel. A rich man buys the tool, a craftsman makes it.